post. So that's kind of a high level overview of what it is. It's really, really, really simple, and I'm going to show it to you in a second. But I think at this point, since we only have an hour, one of the more important questions is not how do you do it, because we can work on that later, but more, what can you do with it, right? How can it help you? How can it help me? How can it help our clients? And the answer is, even at a very, very, very beginner level, it can do a lot. Just handy little things. So these are, what I did is I went through some of the scripts that I've written over the last year or so that I've been trying to teach this to myself, with the help of, by the way, a lot of very helpful people within the ICC community. Um, and just written down some of the things that I've ended up writing and that I use pretty often, so that you could get a sense of them. So here's something that I do all the time. I put dates in custom fields. You would think that would be easy to do within the user interface, but you guys all know it's not. So what sorts of things might you want to put a date in a custom field for? Well, ones that I use a lot or are, I want to record when someone first purchased from me or from a client. So we create a custom field for that, and then when their first order is placed, it puts today's date in that field. In the future, every time that code runs, then it looks and says, if there's a value in that field already, don't change it, but if it's blank, put today's date in. Another one very similar to that is what I call class of. When I was coming up in the business world, I worked for a computer supplies wholesaler for many years, and they used a business development model that I have used throughout my own businesses as well as client businesses, which is where, when you're working on new business development, you create classes of. So for me, a class of is a month. So when a new customer comes on board, they become class of April 2013, class of April 2000 or May 2013, and I tag them as being of that class, and then I can report on them on that class of customers who came in that month, over time, and learn things about how their attrition rate, or how long it takes them to, what percentage of them become customers, and how long it takes them to reach certain sales thresholds and things like that. So class of is something that I use a lot. So I set class of with a little snippet of code. Last video viewed is another one that I use. I have a video site. So every time someone views a video on my site, there's a field. Last video viewed gets updated with today's date. Last site visit is another one. And I'm sure you can come up with many, many, many different uses for this. But just putting dates in custom fields is pretty darn handy. Now, how do you do that? Well, I already showed that to you. That's this snippet of code here that I already showed you, which is, you say, this is the code for today's date, and that you're going to update the contact record with that date. Very, very, that's it. I mean, this is like, you don't have to care anything about this or what it is or how you do it. What I want you to get out of that is like doing this thing that's really handy as a pocket on a shirt, takes 3 lines of code basically, right? And it's a building block that's in the SDK that's already written for you. All you kind of have to do is learn enough to be able to fill in the blanks basically, or plagiarize the code that's already there. 3 lines of code to do something that's really super handy. Another one that I use all the time are counters. And where you increment a counter every time someone does something. Every every time someone, yeah, right. Every time someone does something on your website, you increment a counter. So again, videos, because that's big for me. Every time you watch one, not only do I put the date in there, but I also increment it by 1. Site visits is another one. If you are familiar with RFM analysis, which is recency, frequency, monetary, I know, in fact, Jermaine Griggs, if you've ever been to any of his things, he talks about that a lot as well. So all the data that's required for recency, frequency, monetary, not just analysis, but then also campaigns, triggers that are built off of those things to really kind of customize the experience and hit people at the right times with the right information based on that. Basically recency, frequency, monetary is just dates, counters, and order history. Well, you got the order history already, and Infusionsoft takes care of that pretty easily outside of the box. But the recency and frequency, not so much, right? So that's what we would use these counters for. And again, here's just an example out of code that I have out of my video viewed one. This little counter thing here right in the middle, right? It's saying that every time someone comes to my site, I'm going to increment that counter by 1, right? Actually, let me just tell you what this does. It says, go to this person's record, because let me tell you why I'm going to do this. One of the things that if you want to learn the API that I encourage people to do is forget about writing code. The first thing you do is learn how to read it. Like just sit down and just like sit down and say, just because it's especially PHP, it's pretty readable, especially if someone puts good comments in it. So if they comment it and then you say, all right, well I read the comment and this is what it says it's going to do. It's going to increment the video watch counter by 1. The field is underscore video watch counter, so I know that's a custom field, and then it's going to load that current value and then add the new value. Okay, so let's see if I can see that in the code, and that's kind of how you teach yourself code, or at least this kind of code, not advanced code, but this kind of plagiarizing ability to do little things, beginner code. All right, so this says, all right, well we have this field that we want, video watched counter. That's the first line in this variable. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to my app and we're going to load for this contact record the value that's in that field, right? So we're going to go get it. So right now, let's say it says it has 5 in that field. I need to know that it has 5, right? So then now once I have that value, I'm going to increment it by 1. So now that's what this does. So now it's 6, right? And that variable is now 6. And then I got to put it back in there, which is what this DS update, data service update does. Goes to my app, and for that same contact, it updates that contact ID with the new value, which is 6. That's it, right? Pretty handy and just a few lines of code, okay? So that's how counters work. Here's some other things that I do. Manipulating data. For example, this sounds just silly, trivial, but to me it's really helpful. I have a little script, you'll see it here in a second, that I wrote that capitalizes the first name. So you know how many people put their stuff in all caps or all lowercase, or they, mistype and they put 2 capital letters and then the rest lowercase? Well, that looks really stupid in an email campaign. So, right, and we're trying to make it look personalized, and it's obvious that in fact, sometimes I think people do that on purpose. But anyway, so I have this little script. I don't care about their last name because I never say Dear John Doe. I always just say Dear John. So every single form that I run, every opt-in form, every anything where people put their name in, the very next step after that is an HTTP post to my cap first name script that fixes that, so that I never have to worry about that. Okay, so that's an example. I've got a much more complex example, which is, I play polo, and my biggest client is the United States Polo Association, who have a handicap system that's the most convoluted thing that you've ever seen in your life. And so it's made up of a combination of letters and numbers, right? And so one of the things I needed to do was to be able to compare those things and record in a custom field. Is the handicap that they were given this year higher than the previous year? Because we want to record their all-time high handicap in a field in the year they achieved it. So I was able to make a really super little easy script that did that manipulated that data so that I could do that. So here is, for example, my cap first name script. This is it. This is right. This is where it connects. This is where it takes the value in the first name and capitalizes it properly, and then uses the data service update to put it back in the contact record in the first name field. That's it, right? A few lines of code, very handy. This is my ugly handicap thing, but nonetheless, it's a few more lines of code, but was really, really important, and easy. Like, why would I pay a programmer to do something this easy, when I really needed my programmers to be working on things that were a lot harder? Okay, so those are examples from my own practice of data manipulation. Querying data. These are, if I had to say, based on my own use of Infusionsoft, one of like my biggest frustrations with it is getting data out of it and being so limited. I come from Salesforce. My company's ran on Salesforce for 7 years. I'm used to being able to query any single piece of information in any format I want at any time. And so I found that very limiting when I moved over to Infusionsoft, but not so much anymore because now I have the API and I can query all that data all I want, right? So for example, I have a case where I use the data service to query and find contacts that have no opportunity attached to them. Just a use case that came up in my own work. Another one is to display search results on a website, to be able to go into the Infusionsoft database, search the members of the organization using the query, and then display them and display their contact and other information on the website, right? Dynamically out of the database so that we don't have to keep the website updated. Those are some examples of how you might use query. I won't show you code on that because you're probably getting bored with that at this point. But and then here's some other things, just more custom functionality that I've done. Randomly assigning a contact as it comes into the database to an email split test group. So actually, when I very first started with Infusionsoft, I was on a mastermind call where Jordan actually did this and gave the code, and but I didn't know the API or even really understand what the API was, so I didn't pay attention or write it down and never could find the code again. So I ended up rewriting it, which was frustrating, but I have it, and that's another thing that I would, not only do I encourage you to learn how to read it, but I also encourage you to plagiarize it, which I know as a practice we call them swipe files in marketing, and we do the same in programming, right? Whenever anyone gives you those things, grab them, because you never know when you're going to be able to take it and use the same idea and just customize it a little bit and use it. So that was one that I knew about from him but had to rewrite. An order form redirect. Use these all the time. I have 6 different order forms, and depending on input that the user puts on the web form, I'm going to send them to a different order form, either for a different product, a different price, a different something, right? A different membership. So I have an initial form that's a web form, and then based on that, I send them to the proper order form. All the time I use those. Super simple to do. Again, couple lines of code. Changing an opportunity stage, excuse me, based on a web form. That's, again, you'd think that would be easy to do. I'm going to get a drink of water here, one second. Got something in my throat. You'd think that would be easy to do, but if you talk to the Infusionsoft folks, they will tell you that they assumed and still assume that stage moves are manual, that's a salesperson who should be doing that. Well, I actually have places where I want those stages to move automatically. So since you can't do that out of the box with any kind of a trigger or anything, I can do it programmatically using the API. Expiring links in campaign emails. I actually got this one from Juan Sutton. He answered a question in the forum. I found it. He gave kind of the basic structure of it, and because I knew just enough to take his answer and figure out how to write what I needed. Uploading a file to a file box from a web form. I had actually done that, and then more recently I saw John Pantoja put the code for this up, which I love, and thank all of you guys for sharing your knowledge who know so much more than the rest of us. It makes our lives so much easier. But this is an easy one to do. Cloning an opportunity is another one. And actually, this is my pièce de résistance. I will tell you, this is like the first, I had a client who wanted this. They need, like, they start out with one opportunity and they need to turn it sometimes into 10 or 20 clones exactly identical in their use case. You can't do that. And I told them we'd do it, and I was going to have my programmers do it, but we were so backed up. It was going to be weeks and weeks and weeks before this actually got done. And one weekend, I just said, you know what, I bet I can do that. And I sat down and I wrote it, and I even posted it in Facebook that this was like my first end-to-end, more than just kind of a simple little block of code where I actually I was really proud of that, right? But the way I got to this cloning an opportunity was by playing with those little building blocks first, doing all of these little things, and once you know how to do that, what you realize is that these bigger tasks or projects are actually just linking together or stringing together those little building blocks of code one after another after another after another to get what you want. So that's how that one worked. But those are examples again of things that someone who didn't know API or how to write code a year ago, I do these things all the time, and I can do them relatively quickly without having to get my programmers involved. My name is Kim Snyder. I'm an Infusionsoft certified consultant and founder of Train and Simple. I hope you found this video helpful. In my experience, the Infusionsoft API is absolutely one of the most overlooked aspects of the amazing business building tool that is Infusionsoft, and it would be well worth your time to learn how to put it to work for you. If you're an Infusionsoft savvy non-programmer interested in learning the API quickly and easily, check out the API for Beginners Learning Lab from Train and Simple by going to trainandsimple.com and clicking on Courses. And if I can answer any questions for you, send me an email at kim@kimsnyder.com. That's SNIDER.